Welcome back to the Business B.E.A.R podcast. It's your buddy Connor Norman here, your business development specialist with Garrett County Business Development. I'm saying a lot of business right now, but that's all we believe in here. That's right, we interview our local movers and shakers in economic development, including some of our officials that work in the field. We also interview our businesses in 15 to 30 minute segments. Heck, sometimes we go up to an hour and more, but it's all about you, Garrett County, and learning what we have available right here in our backyard. And we've got another exciting episode where we'll be hearing from a local business owner that's got two exciting businesses here in the downtown area. That's right, I've got Kendall Ludwig with me today, the principal and owner-operator of both Jitterbug Dance Studio and CurlyRed. But before we get there, let's go over some housekeeping here. Remember, this is sponsored by Garrett County Business Development, and any opinions shared by the host or their guest are their own and do not reflect that of Garrett County Government or Garrett County Business Development. All right, that's the legalese out of the way. Let's get into the show and have some fun here. We're into the Business B.E.A.R podcast. Welcome, Kendall, to our humble studio here in the Garrett County Courthouse. How are you feeling today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Connor.
Well, it's wonderful to have you in here. I'm excited to talk about what you have offering right here in our community in downtown Oakland. Beautiful small town that's got so much to offer, including everything you've got going on. We're going to break that down. Kendall, before we go there, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am not a local. I was born and raised in Baltimore. So I lived there for the first 30 plus years of my life. I told my husband before we were married that Garrett County was beautiful, a great place to visit, but that I would never live here.
Okay. Okay. I'm glad things changed. Let's talk about that process.
Okay. So my husband's parents, Mark, if you're listening, hi, they lived right off of Sand Flat when we first started dating.
Okay.
And Mark's dad was a retired police officer and loved to come out here to hunt. And so they moved out here in the 90s. So Mark actually went to Southern Middle and High. And then him and I met at Towson University. We were both design majors. He was a year older than I was, so we didn't meet right away.
Mm-hmm.
But it was definitely a very quick connection. And, I don't like to say love at first sight, but I had kind of sworn off dating, actually, and then met him and changed my mind.
Oh, how awesome is that?
So it was a great meeting, and he quickly decided that I needed to come experience where he had spent a good part of his childhood.
Okay.
So we would come up here for the weekend, and in the summer we'd come and we'd rent a boat. In the winter we'd come and ski. And then he brought me to Autumn Glory, and we've been to every Autumn Glory since we've been together, except for when I was too pregnant with Margot to travel.
Gotcha. Okay. That's a fair excuse.
Yeah, that's the only one I've missed in the past, 20 plus years.
Wow.
And the first time I came to Autumn Glory, I just completely fell in love with that kind of small town autumn festival and thought that Oakland was quaint, beautiful. The foliage was beautiful. I loved just the camaraderie, the fact that Mark would see people that he hadn't seen since high school, and it would be a time that people would come back and they'd spend time with their family and their friends, and it was magical. And that was around the time that I told him that I couldn't live here. And to be fair, at that time, I had no cell phone service here. It was hard to find internet. This was early 2000s. So it was a little bit of a different time from a technology standpoint.
Definitely.
But I'm also a city girl through and through. And the idea of moving so far away from a city was a little terrifying.
Yeah.
And so, that was kind of my stance. And this was a great place to get away. And I almost liked the fact that we'd have to completely disconnect when we come out here because we had no other option. So it felt really like a true retreat. And then we were doing our thing in Baltimore County. I started my business in 2007. I was telling you a little bit ago that before I started my business, I was working for Polk Audio, started freelancing on the side. Trying to make this a little short. Started freelancing on the side and decided that I liked the freelance work better. And so I started my company in January of 2007, and then was still working at my full-time job for about 6 months. And then my work started picking up on the CurlyRed side. And so I had to go to my creative director and tell her that I was quitting.
My.
Yeah, and I really liked that job. She was like a mentor to me. I had been there for over 4 years, and it was my first like real job out of college. I had a couple of jobs up until that point, but it was really kind of my first job in the graphic design field. Okay. She was extremely supportive. So I quit to do CurlyRed full time. And I should say also that Mark was really supportive of this, even though it was scary. I didn't go to school for business. I went to school for design. And I didn't really know anything about starting my own business or what that looked like. I didn't have a real business plan. I didn't have a bunch of money saved up. It was just kind of like this thing that I wanted to try, and it felt like the timing was right to give it a try, and I figured there are worse things than failure, and if it all blew up in my face, that I would go back and get another job. So that was still in 2007, and then of course I'm not paying attention to global economics because why would I? But I didn't realize that like the entire economy was about to crash.
Yeah.
And when that happened, the few clients that I had accumulated up to that point vanished, because when people see the writing on the wall, they always cut marketing first, always.
Yeah.
So my clients went away, and then I had to kind of start all over again. So I did a lot of networking that first year, 2 years. And I joke that CurlyRed is like my firstborn, because that's the kind of attention I had to give it when it first started in order to kind of get it off the ground.
Yeah.
So any networking event I could go to, any person that would have coffee with me, I sat down and just kind of gave them my pitch and tried to start building those relationships, and slowly but surely met a couple of really helpful people early on and started slowly growing my business. What was really nice about the way that it started is that it kind of led me into making my transition into motherhood easier. So, when I got pregnant with my first, I was able to be super flexible about that. And like taking my first maternity leave was a little bit less of a deal than it had been if I had been working a traditional job. And that was part of the motivation. Was the first thing was that I wanted my work to be have more variety than what it had been up till that point. But the second piece was that, unfortunately, corporate America is not kind to working mothers. There's not a lot of freedom there, and there's not a lot of flexibility. And in our industry, the way that I was kind of going before I started CurlyRed was thinking that I might be a creative director at an agency. And what that looks like is 60 to 70 hours a week. And like I kind of knew what that road looked like, and it just didn't seem conducive with motherhood. And I also didn't want to take a full break from working, until my kids were of school age and then try to return. So I felt a little stuck and felt like I was going to have to create my own path in order to make it work, because I really wanted to be a mom. And I really wanted to spend time with my children while they were young, before they were in school. And so I'm super thankful that CurlyRed allowed me that flexibility to, be able to take them to the zoo or go to their dance class or have a play date with a friend and then work around their nap schedule or sleep schedule. And I did that for years, and it was hard. I'm not going to say that it wasn't hard and super stressful at moments, but I would not have traded that experience of not having to do like either full-time daycare or just drop out of the workforce, because that's what it looked like my options were going to be.
What a struggle, and you were able to overcome that through creative entrepreneurship.
Well, yeah, thank you. And like I said, I realized really quickly that I did not know what I was doing. And I'm not saying that out of modesty. I'm saying that like I never thought I'd have my own business. So I never thought I needed to take business classes. And so for all of you people out there listening, if you're still in school or thinking about going back to school, take a business class, because you never know. And that stuff will serve you in many areas of your life.
Definitely. And we can help put them in touch with free business resources and classes. So
that's awesome.
Just a little self-promotion there.
I love that. And I'm all about people finding free or affordable resources to do things. In fact, I found a How to Start Your Own Small Business class through the community college in Baltimore County.
Oh,
That was
nice.
like a 4 Saturday class, and I learned a lot in that class. I learned about what sort of entity I could be. I learned about creating a basic business plan, what sort of things I should outsource, like accounting, things that like I have no business doing myself. And it was a class that I took thinking that if it scared the crap out of me, maybe it would convince me to not do the thing that I really
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do. But I honestly got to the end of the class and was like, I think I can do
Yeah,
this.
made you more confident.
I think one of the things that has served me well as a business owner is the fact that I'm incredibly stubborn. When I want something or I think I can do something, even people in my life telling me that I can't do that, that almost
Yeah.
fuels me more. And I did have a few people early on that thought I was crazy. And I don't blame them. Like, what business did I have starting my own firm? If I knew if I knew then what I knew now, I don't know that I would have jumped so quickly. I think I would have waited a little while, and like I said, it all worked out, but it was scary. It's always been scary. Gosh, I'm coming up on 18 years in January, and there really hasn't been a season in that entire 18 years that hasn't been scary on some level. The fears have just shifted,
Yeah.
but it's always there. Yeah, so anyway, I did that. I was kind of a very slow but steady growth, which again that dovetailed nicely into motherhood because I could kind of ramp up my hours as my girls got older, who are now 14 and 12, which is crazy. They're one's a freshman at Southern High, and the other one's in seventh, and I did that. And at that time, Mark was working full time. He was at an engineering firm, and then he was actually at a creative agency running the website of their company.
Okay.
And so he was doing that agency life and he was doing those long hours. And so towards the end of our time in Baltimore, him and I were like passing ships in the night.
Oh, geez.
I'm raising 2 kids and juggling a business. He's working 60, 70 hours sometimes. There would be nights where he would come home, or better yet, I would meet him at his office in Baltimore and hand him the girls and get in the car and drive to a networking event. And then he would take them home and feed them dinner and put them
Wow.
to bed. I do not recommend that for any marriage or any, like, it was just such a stressful situation because it felt like we were barely seeing each other. It's already hard enough for a husband and wife to connect when you have young children or any spouses to connect during that time. But the added level of I'm doing the hustle thing, he's working long hours. It was just not sustainable. And that was like the last several years that we were in Baltimore. And even though there were so many great things about our lives there, we were really active in the church that we were a part of. We had family and lifelong friends that all lived there that we could see anytime we wanted.
Yeah.
And that was all wonderful. But at the end of the day, him and I were like frazzled balls of stress. And
Yeah.
you know, I really felt I had read a book. I was serving as a lay leader in the church that I was part of, and we read this book that was called, the name of the book is escaping me. But anyway, at the end of every chapter, there would be like it was like a spiritual discipline. And one of the spiritual disciplines was called margin. And the author was talking about building time into your life because without that space, like even between meetings, for instance, like that's a small example, but building in little spaces, because it's in that margin that we find gratitude, that we find joy, that we find contentedness. And when we have no margin, or in my case, I actually had like a deficit of margin, I was actually like over scheduled.
No kidding.
It's really, really hard to be grateful for anything when you feel like you're just running around with a chicken with its head cut off. And that's where I felt like I was. In the meantime, we were in this little tiny townhouse in Reisterstown, and we were looking kind of for our next place to live. And I felt like maybe this could be an opportunity to do some things differently. And so we started looking. We weren't really finding what we were looking for. We just kind of took a step of faith and put our house on the market. And then a friend of Mark's from high school here, who doesn't live here either, listed a house on Facebook that was on John Bell's website. that was up on 2nd Street in historic Oakland. And I looked at this listing and I thought, wow, that house is beautiful. It's not in our price range, but how cool would that be to be like on the Autumn Glory parade route
Yeah.
in this old historic house, which I've always been kind of in love with historic houses anyway. So something compelled me to click into his website and put in our price credentials, and this house in Mountain Lake Park came up. And it's in the historic district. And it was this big, beautiful Victorian with a wraparound porch and a detached garage and all these things that Mark and I had talked about in a house that we would want. It just happened to be 200 miles west of where we had been looking.
Yeah.
And I just could not get this house out of my head. And when I told Mark about it, he thought I was joking. He was like, "But that's in Garrett County." And I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "You told me you'd never live in Garrett County." I said, I know, but I don't know. Things change. My what I want out of life is a little different than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I feel like this could be an opportunity to like build a different kind of life than the one that we're living right now, which we had both agreed was not serving us well.
Okay.
So we didn't tell anybody where we were going. We put the girls in the car. I called Jay Ferguson because he was the only realtor I knew here. He went to school with my husband, and I had actually done some design work for him when I was still in Baltimore.
Okay.
And I called him and I said, "Jay, we want to see this house." And he goes, "Well, you guys are driving 3.5 hours. Would you like to see a few more while you're here?" And what I said back to him is I said, "It's either this house or we're not moving."
Oh, gotcha.
And he was like, "Okay, no pressure." You know, he's thinking that this is just silliness. And I honestly thought it was going to be a drive out to see this house to almost get it out of my system, because I figured there had to be something wrong with the house because of the way that it was priced, because I had been looking at Baltimore real estate and I just couldn't fathom how a house that beautiful was that affordable, honestly. Yeah. So we didn't tell anybody where we were going with the girls in the car, and then we drive out here and we get to this house and we just knew, like we just walked through and we're like, yep. So then we had a lot of interesting conversations with family members that were completely blindsided by the fact that we were going to be moving. After living in Baltimore literally my entire life, moving somewhere completely like that I had no reason. It wasn't like I was moving for a job or a sick parent. I was literally just moving for quality of life reasons. Mark had to make sure he still had a job. So he had to go to his boss and say, you know, can we figure out some sort of remote situation? There were all these things that had to fall in place, but sure enough, you know, I think there were a lot of people in our lives that were confused and sad, but they also, I don't know, they loved us into the moving. Like, I think they were like, if this is the right thing for you, we're going to try to get behind it.
Wow. How awesome is that?
Yeah. So that was 8 years ago, believe it or not. So that happened 8 years ago. And the timing was so perfect too, because we literally moved here. It was almost to the day 8 years ago, just like maybe like a week or so ago was our 8-year anniversary of moving here. And it was like we moved on a Friday and the girls started school on Monday. Like, that's how perfect the timing was.
Wow.
That they didn't even have to miss any school or anything.
Yeah.
And we, you know, I mean, moving to an area like this, it's a huge transition from a city. But it has been wonderful for our family. It was the right move. And I'm not going to say that it hasn't been without its challenges and adjustments. And are there things about Baltimore that I miss? Like, all the time. But I absolutely felt like we made the right decision, not only for my business, but just like for our family.
Incredible. Yeah. No, I think that's one of the most powerful things you said there. You know, first of all, you've had such a dedicated journey to being a good mother, to being an entrepreneur, to growing a business, and just, it's an incredible story. Thanks for sharing with us today. And I like the part where you say coming out to Garrett County really was a nice balance between work and life. Did you feel that right away? Like, hey, this isn't necessarily the rat race I came from in Baltimore. This is a little more open and freeing. Do you feel that way?
100%. I mean, oh my word, Connor, I can't even tell you. Like, literally the first week The girls go back to school. Mark has to go back downstate because he had worked out something with his boss where he was still going to be in person part of the time. So
Yeah.
he's down in Baltimore. I had a home office at that time, and that's all I had ever had up until that point. So we set up a nice little home office in the house. He's down in Baltimore. The girls are at school. I take my lunch break on my side porch, and it was one of a day just like today. It was like
Yeah.
70 and beautiful with like a light fall breeze. And I'm sitting there on my side porch just listening to nature because there was no cars driving by or anything, and tears streaming down my face. Like it was like God saved me from myself. Like I
Wow.
felt a very powerful, like this was the piece that I had been missing from my life for a long time.
Wow.
And of course, part of that was the fact that like raising young children is never going to be like peaceful or easy. But I think it was just this very real awareness that I had been in that rat race. I had been on that like hamster wheel of go, 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 get there, do this, add this, whatever. And when I got to Garrett County, I made a very intentional decision to literally kind of pause everything in my life other than my family and CurlyRed. That was the only thing that was on my plate, and it hadn't been that way in a really long time. And there was such a freedom in all of a sudden having like space to breathe. Like I felt like I had been holding a breath for a really long time, and I was finally
Wow.
exhaling.
That's
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah.
So you get into Garrett County and you waste no time getting CurlyRed up and going. It feels like you've been here 20 years.
Oh,
With
thank
the amount
you.
of impact that you've had on the community, you got involved with local businesses right away. You started seeing CurlyRed design on the buildings and stuff. Tell us about that process of getting up and going here in Garrett County.
Yeah, it is. It was a little bit of a challenge because you're right. When I got here, no one knew who I was, and no one. There would be no reason for anyone to know. In Baltimore, you can't throw a rock without hitting a graphic designer. I was one of thousands of creative agencies in Baltimore, and because it was just me, I flew under the radar of a lot of people. And in Baltimore, unless I did do a lot of networking, but I still didn't have any sort of like, high level clients or anything that would have gotten me a lot of notoriety there.
Hmm.
So I relocate here. No one knows me. No one has any reason to give me any business. And I kind of was aware of the fact that it was going to take some time. I was lucky enough that, with technology, I was able to continue doing a lot of the work that I was already doing for my Baltimore clients. And I
Okay.
already at that point had clients that were outside of the Baltimore area. And technology has always been very kind to my industry in the way that I was doing a virtual team before that was a thing. I had subcontractors that I had never met in person. I had clients I had never met in person, with telephone calls and conference calls, video calls, email, Dropbox, cloud file sharing. There's so much that you can do virtually now that wouldn't have been possible like 20, 30 years ago. So even like pretty early on in my business, I was able to move my business 200 miles and still have most of my clients. Like
Yeah.
most of my
Very cool.
clients stuck with me, through that move, and they had no problem with the fact that I was moving from my family. They thought that was cool. So I had that on my side. I didn't feel like an immediate pressure like I have to start getting some Garrett County clients. That being said, I was really interested in getting involved in the community because I was enchanted with life here and how people do business, and that I had never lived in a small town before, and I thought I want to get involved. I want to help make this community stronger. Particularly Oakland, I've always had this. Even though I live in Mountain Lake Park, the building that I bought 2 years ago is in Oakland, and I've before that rented office space in Oakland and felt very strongly that it should be a thriving small town. And if there was any small way I could be a part of that, I wanted to, get involved early on. So I started, helping out with some of the events that the town was putting on. I quickly joined the chamber and started going to chamber events, which is where I think you and I met for the first time through the chamber. Um, and I started just looking for opportunities to connect with people. I met some of my closest friends here through there was a wedding professionals support group And I'm not like in the wedding profession, but I was thinking, maybe some of these photographers or other people that are in the wedding space, maybe they might need to partner with a designer to do an invitation design, for instance, or signage for an event. And so I figured these are probably creative people that I should meet. And sure enough, there were some amazing people in that room that I'm still friends with now. So I really did try early on to just find where people were connecting already and just plug myself in
Yeah.
as I could. One other funny, like, quick anecdote from when I first moved to Mountain Lake Park is I moved end of August. So I was all excited about my first Autumn Glory here, like being a resident and being here for Autumn Glory. And my mom had come up from Baltimore to spend the weekend with us, and we're sitting on my porch, that same spot where I was mentioning before, and having a cup of tea on the Friday afternoon of Autumn Glory weekend. And all of a sudden, a woman who I later found out was Karen, one of my neighbors, was coming by in like a flatbed truck with a bullhorn saying, and on your left, you'll see the Elberon, which is the name of my house. We were basically on a tour. They were doing a tour of Mountain Lake Park, and I was like, I turned to my mom and I said, "What's happening?" And she was like, "I think your house is on a tour." And I was like, "That's what? I didn't what?" And she was like, "I don't know." So I go up to the ticket booth and find out that every Friday of Autumn Glory they do these tours of the historic district, and that tickled me. I was like, I can't believe I live in a house that's on a tour for something.
Yep.
Like, that's crazy. So yeah, so anyway, little things like that have happened that have just been
nice. It's an icon.
pleasure. Yeah.
Sometimes I think back before I make this statement, I remember your first ribbon cutting and going and being there for that. I think I have a picture of it. We're going to pull that out. I have a lot of them. I probably have way back. But then I start to feel older, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's right. I've been doing this a while, haven't I? But anyway, I remember how exciting that was when you first got up and going here in downtown Oakland. It was definitely a unique business and something that we didn't really have at the time. We had some people in the field, or maybe some people trying their hand at it, but we didn't have really any dedicated graphic designers that anyone could take advantage of. Garrett County really has, from the first time you were visiting to the first time you moved here, it's expanded so much. I mean, the growth has just been astounding in the availability of services, and having unique businesses like yours has made Garrett County, a great place to live, in that we now can provide something that historically wasn't here. So what you do and your investment into these communities is important. I say this all the time. If you open a shop like yours in a more expansive area like Baltimore, you said it yourself. You're one of 1,000. Here, you are the only show in town. You can begin putting your name out there, and you can create a legacy, and you can really do a lot of work helping in your industry in this community. And that's why we encourage, more business owners to start thinking about Garrett County as home. But I digress from CurlyRed. Tell us a little bit about the business itself and the type of services that you can offer someone that's just learning about you for the first time.
Sure. Well, like I mentioned before, we're coming up on 18 years of business, and we offer creative services to small businesses and nonprofits. A lot of times they are of the size where they have creative needs, but they don't have the reason or ability to have someone like me on staff. So we like to position ourselves as an outsourced creative department. Our core capabilities are branding, print, and web. So branding looks like your visual, your logo mark, and the way that you use that mark. So a business card, letterhead, envelope, email signature. And then our print design would be anything from a print ad in a local publication to signage, whether that's trade show signage or billboards or signage that's hanging outside of your place of business, to an annual report or a book design. I really, really enjoy doing package design. So I sometimes do labels for retail products, and I really enjoy that work. We do brochures and rack cards and things like that. Now, I want to, just as a caveat, like, we don't print anything in-house. We actually love partnering with local print providers and the people that create the things that we design. like apparel and other things, we have local resources of people that we can partner with to get those things made. But we do the design piece of it. And then on the website, we do a lot of fully custom WordPress websites. That's a big part of our business now. And with that, we do digital ads, we do email marketing, and other digital, like social media assets and things like that. So it's a pretty extensive list. The things that we don't do in house, like I said, we try our best to find local providers that we can partner with, like photographers and videographers, copywriters, things like that. And so we try to really keep the talent as local as possible. We're a small but mighty team. There's 3 of us that are full time, and then we have interns and we use subcontractors as needed. But I think between the 3 of us, we have a pretty robust service offering, and we have a really good dynamic. We like to bounce ideas off of each other. We collaborate internally. We critique each other's work. I think we make each other better designers. And so I
Nice.
think we as an agency, I'm much stronger now as being part of this team than it was when it was just me. Because like I said, it was like that for many, many years. And so I'm really grateful to Mark and Olivia for what they bring to CurlyRed, and their willingness to collaborate, the fact that we all realize that we're learning and that we're not always going to get it right and that we can be better. And I think we all encourage each other to be better.
That's awesome. I know as a business owner myself, sometimes you get in your head that it's my way, it's the highway, and it's
Mhm.
always great to have others to bounce new ideas off of, because the last thing you want is stagnation.
Yeah.
Same old song, same old dance. When you have a great team behind you, it's always good to help shake things up, and it gets your creative juices that have been there the whole time stirred up, and onto different tasks, which is
Yeah,
fantastic.
agreed. And I'm continually inspired by um, just the creativity in Garrett County in general. There are so many artists in this county that are doing incredible work, from illustrators to potters to woodworkers, to people that are crafting their own food products, and to jewelry makers and musicians. I mean, the list goes on and on. The number of incredibly talented, creative people in this county that have been here way longer than I have, is humbling, honestly. I think it's pretty remarkable that we seem like we're in this kind of remote part of the state, and yet there are just incredibly talented people. A lot of them I've become even more aware of through like the Garrett County Arts Council, and other entities like that. We're pretty involved with our town theater, and there's incredibly talented people over there. And a lot of our local venues that have live music. I'm just constantly impressed with all these people that like live here that could
Yeah.
choose to live other places and probably make a very good living a lot of other places, and they choose to make Garrett County their home, which I think is amazing. And so not only is the nature here inspiring, but I'm inspired by the other creatives that have lived here, like I said, a lot of them a lot longer than I have.
Great. And you think that contributes directly to how you then create and are successful here in the community?
Absolutely. I think it challenges me and it humbles me because, like I said, I feel like I'm always learning and evolving and trying to become a stronger designer. And when I see people doing incredible work, it encourages me to push myself and say, is this really the best I can do? And I think we hold ourselves internally at CurlyRed to a pretty high standard. We try not to, we're careful not to let things out the door that we're not proud to put our name on.
Yeah.
So we've even gotten internally into the practice of, when we do a branding project, for instance, we'll show a client, 3 initial concepts for a logo, for instance. We've gotten to the point where we don't even like to show clients something that we wouldn't be ready to go forward with tomorrow.
Gotcha.
Like, we don't want to show them a concept that we're not 100% behind. We always internally will have our favorites. I'm not going to lie. There's usually a direction that we will internally be like, I think this one's the strongest one. But all 3 of them are great solutions. And then we want to hear from the client. When we're working with a client, we like it to be a relationship, we like there to be dialogue. and we want to hear from them. And we want it to be this collaborative piece where whatever we end up like wherever we end up landing is a true reflection of not only the creativity that we're bringing to the table, but a true reflection of what that business or organization is. Which is why I don't feel like we have a particular aesthetic, because if we're designing, for a musician, it's going to look very different than when we're designing for a law office.
Yeah.
And it's all about, the target demographic of what those pieces are created to do, and who they're created to serve. And so we're always trying to keep that end user in mind, but we want the piece to look like the client. I mean, that's really the goal. If I can create a piece and someone says, wow, that feels like exactly me, then I feel like I've done my job.
Great. So tell me a little bit about the process then. If I'm a business owner or an individual and I have some design or some branding needs, how would I go about getting hold of you to start this process?
That's a great question. So we have a contact form on our website, curlyred.com. You can go there, you fill a contact form, it comes right to me, and I will get back to you, within a single business day, to figure out a time to either schedule a call or an in-person meeting. We always offer free consultations for anybody that wants to meet with us. Or you can call our office number. It's 410-878-2068. And Olivia will probably pick up the phone if it's during business hours. And that's the other beautiful thing about us having a very small agency, is that you can talk to any of us at any time. You're never going to be designated to like a junior account manager. We like to have really personal relationships with all of our clients, and to let them know that they can reach out to us, whether it's by phone or email at any time.
Very cool.
Once we set up that initial meeting, then we would just sit down and listen to what your design needs are. And, we're not always the perfect fit for everyone. So we'll sit down, we'll hear what their needs are, we'll hear what your budget is. We want to hear about your vision and where you want to go. And then we'll talk about our recommendations and figure out if it makes sense for us to put together a proposal for you to consider. And then, if you decide that you want to work with us, it's a really easy process. It's an easy onboarding process. We try to keep things, casual and easy and not overly complicated.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Kendall. It's important always to share that contact information because, we've got people listening that are going to want to come and start taking advantage of those services.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for sharing that. I want to transition a little bit to talk about another project you've got going on, and that's Jitterbug Dance Studio.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about this and what the inspiration to start a dance studio is.
So I'm a lifelong lover of dance.
Okay.
Been dancing since I was 3 years old. My parents met doing a musical, and so
No way.
yeah, yes, back in the late 70s in Baltimore, they were in a musical together, and so musical theater was something that was around my entire childhood.
Okay.
And so not only did I take like the dance classes that you would expect a child to take, but I was also dancing in musicals. Quite a bit. As I got older, I started doing some assistant choreography and choreography for local theater, just on the community theater level. I knew that personally that it wasn't something that I was ever going to pursue as a career. It's always just been a passion of mine. And when I moved here, I realized pretty quickly that there were no dance studios specifically for adults. And there were a couple of local studios that would offer adult classes. So I took a couple of those. I even taught a couple of those at a couple local studios. But I don't know. I started just kind of messing around with this idea of, if I was to create my own studio, what would it look like? And there were a couple of things that jumped out at me that I think I wanted to differentiate myself in this way. So one of those things was that I wanted it to really be about learning the form of movement that the class was being offered, and there being little or no emphasis on competition or performance. Not because those things aren't important. That was just not the style of studio that I wanted to open. And again, there are plenty of studios in the area that are available for families that are looking for those kind of programs, especially for their children. Uh, I did not want to replicate or even step on the toes of the studios that are here and already doing great work. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to offer something that I felt like was a little bit different. And what that meant was a big emphasis on adult classes and then very little or no emphasis on competition and performance, which I think are like kind of the two things that really differentiate us. We also don't just offer dance classes. It's really been a kind of an organic evolution of what we offer, but I chose the words like movement studio because I wanted to be able to open it up to all different forms of movement, including different styles of yoga, Pilates. We've offered body bar classes. We're looking at even some other classes that are in the movement space but aren't kind of traditional dance classes on top of dance. And within the dance, you know, arena, there are so many places you can go. You think of a dance studio, I think most people think like ballet, tap, and jazz. Those are usually the, if you're going to go to a traditional dance studio, those are the classes that are most commonly offered. So we have a couple of those classes, but then we also offer some ballroom things. Like I do a intro to East Coast swing for couples,
Oh, wow.
and we have a couple of those workshops coming up soon. We have offered modern, we have offered hip hop, we've offered a couple of different styles, and we've been really thankful to partner with some local spaces that are larger than ours. So, backing up just a second, I mentioned earlier that I purchased a building in downtown Oakland 2 years ago. And it's because of buying that building that Jitterbug exists. Because as even though I've been thinking about this idea for about 5 years, I didn't have a space to have a studio.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit of, obviously, it's hard to have a studio and not have a space where you're running classes out of that studio. So when I went to go look at the building that we ended up purchasing, I saw that there was a back area that they were just using for file storage. So they had two rooms in the very back where they just had file cabinets and shelving. And we don't have many printed records at all. Mostly everything that we store is digital. We have like one small filing cabinet for CurlyRed, and that's pretty much it. So I knew I didn't need that storage. And when I was looking at it, the wheel started turning, and I thought, I think this could be
This
a
is it.
movement.
This is where
This
it
could be the
lands. Yeah.
movement
Yeah.
studio. So the one area we're using as a waiting room, and then the other area is a classroom that holds a teacher and about 8 movers.
Okay.
So it's small, but honestly, in a post-COVID world, sometimes like a small intimate class is preferable to a really large class, especially when
Definitely.
it's inside and closed.
Yeah.
But because of those restrictions, when we do decide to have larger workshops where we want to be able to accommodate more people, we sometimes do things at our town theater. They've been really kind about letting us use that space because we are fellow art organizations as being part of the Arts and Entertainment District in downtown Oakland. So they felt like that's in line with their mission to allow me to, or Jitterbug, to occasionally use a space for a workshop. And then we have extended to our town that if they ever needed additional rehearsal space, that we have space that they could use. So it's a
very cool.
win-win partnership.
Yeah.
And then we've done some things at local venues, like we did some programming at the Ruth Enloe Library in Oakland and Moon Shadow Restaurant at the lake. Lisa was really kind to extend her space to us. So once a month or so, we do a dance night at Moon Shadow. We've done line dancing, and we did a thriller night last Halloween. That was super fun. So it's given me the opportunity to do a lot of interesting things like that, and it's a pretty cool kind of side project for me. And I've met some really amazing people and been able to work with some really talented teachers. I actually only teach one class a week. Everything else is being taught by other people, which is kind of phenomenal, and they're all incredibly talented. So yeah, it's been a really interesting project that I don't think if you had told me a decade ago I'd be doing it, I don't know that I would have believed you, but it
Yeah.
really has been a nice addition to my life.
Not only do you end up in this town that has changed that work-life balance, and you think, oh, initially maybe I didn't want to live there. Now I'm living there. Now I'm owning part of the downtown, several businesses going on. No, it really is an incredible story of growth there. And of course, we look forward to helping, in the future with this podcast and several other things to keep you growing and keep you employing and keep you offering some great services here in our community.
Thank
Speaking of the
you.
community, you reach out and you do a lot of work with our nonprofits, you a lot with local organizations. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So currently, I'm serving on the GOBA board. So that's the Greater Oakland Business Association. And our group is, we're kind of an advocacy group for downtown businesses. So actually, any business in Oakland, we have resources available for those business owners to help them, whether it's with improving their office space or if they want to be involved in events to increase exposure for their businesses, or if they just have a need, like any kind, like a legal need or something else, we hope that we can be a resource of, if we can't help them, that we could hopefully point them in the right direction. And you've been great, Connor, about coming to meetings and making people, making information available to people about grant opportunities. We had talked earlier about free resources, and I worked with, I've worked with a couple of entities for some free resources, and my friend Pat, he's been wonderful, and he helped me find out about Project Restore, which was a Governor Hogan initiative, but has been continued on to the current administration, and it was set up for empty storefronts for enticing business owners to occupy said storefronts and to
Hmm.
help them with ramping up to do that. So it could be a renovation project, or it even could just be offsetting operational costs. And so he made me aware of Project Restore. He reviewed my application. I applied, this was in 2022, and found out at the end of 2022 that I had been awarded what I had asked for, which helped offset my mortgage for the first year I was in my building, which was huge. Huge help. It was a heavy lift to get into my building, and it was, again, a little bit of a risk that I took, that I felt like was a good investment for the future of my
Yeah.
business. And I really don't know, it would have been infinitely harder to make that happen if it hadn't been for that grant.
Yeah, and it was a fantastic grant too. In fact, I think you're the only Garrett County recipient to get Project Restore. I know they've had a second round, which the town of Oakland has been successful in obtaining. That's going to help several businesses.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, talk about a tremendous collaboration. You talk Pat at the Small Business Development Centers of America, and what they do for our local businesses is tremendous. But he helped pair you with a local resource that got you in there, which is incredible. And you've transformed that building. Being an entrepreneur, you've said it several times throughout this podcast so far, it's inherently a risk. And you did that with this building. You've restored it. It's beautiful. It's got a great paint job.
Thank
It's
you.
certainly a lot better than what it was before, just sitting there empty. So I think you really achieved the goal set out by the Project Restore Fund. I think Hogan would come in here and give you a kiss and a hug for giving him credit. I know that time the it always happens. Initiatives that don't come to fruition until the next
Yeah.
administration always, that won't go in this. I'm just
Well,
um,
but you're making a good point about the fact that it's just difficult to be a small business owner, and the cards are stacked against you always.
certainly.
So anytime you can find a resource that's going to give you even the smallest leg up, I say take it, because the large corporations, they have all kinds of factors on their side. Small
Yeah.
businesses, which are the backbone of this country, do not inherently. And it is just difficult. And many years ago, I pursued an MBE, which is a minority business enterprise with the state of Maryland, because I am woman owned and we're considered a minority. It's still, I think, less than 30% of all businesses in Maryland are owned by a woman. And it was a hard process to get that certification, because they really do their due diligence that I'm not a figurehead for some guy, that I'm not trying to take advantage of a disadvantaged program,
Hmm.
but that I actually am the owner of this company, which was fair. And then when I moved out to this area, another resource that I became aware of, I can't remember if it was Pat or someone else that originally told me about this, was the Hub Zone program. So Hub Zone
Definitely.
stands for Historically Underutilized Business Zone, and all of Garrett County is a Hub Zone. And if you are in a Hub Zone, so all you business owners that are listening that live here in Garrett County, you would all qualify as long as your business location is in a hub zone and at least 50% of your employees also live in a hub zone. Those are the only two stipulations to get that certification. And that one was actually a much easier one to get. And it's easy to maintain as well. And the benefit of having that designation is that a lot of, especially state and federal projects, have set asides for disadvantaged businesses in a way to try to level the playing field. Because again, small businesses, especially ones that are run by a minority in a historically underutilized business area, are at a disadvantage. So this is to help kind of give us those opportunities that would normally not be presented to us. And so, I have these certifications. I'm still working on the best ways to kind of use them, but I think it's important to look for any programming like that as a business owner. If it's going to help you succeed, that's what they're there for.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. There is a lot tuned against you. Why not reach out to these resources and like you've done, like so many business owners have done, connecting with an economic development department so that we can help be your eyes and ears and connect everyone to these resources so that, you guys are thriving in our community because that's the ultimate goal. We want everyone achieving here in Garrett County. We want to see growth, not just in population and tax dollars. There's this ever prevailing philosophy we have. I think I say it every episode. It's a JFK quote. I kind of tweaked it a little bit, but the rising tide lifts all ships. He said boats. I say ships. I think ships sounds cooler. But anyway, the rising tide lifts all ships. Basically, as you guys benefit, we benefit. You hire people, you support the local economy, you support the community as a whole. You're going to see on your baseball teams, your local nonprofits, the sponsors are going to come from your local businesses. These monster corporations, as you say, they're not going to get behind you like a local business will. And that's why we try to highlight what we have here because Garrett County's economy is built on the back of small business owners. You guys expand, you guys help maintain this economy, and you grow this economy here. We're not getting these huge factories and warehouses and distribution centers where we're getting passionate individuals like yourself that say, listen, I want to start making a difference in this world, and I've got a great product or a service that I want to start offering. And Garrett County is the canvas
Oh,
to start growing in this way. And
I like that art metaphor.
there you go. I
I
try
love it.
try to tie it back. Keep it all going.
Yeah. Well, and here's like, I think there's still people in my life that don't live here that I think still scratch their head a little bit at this huge kind of switch and deciding to move our family and my business here. And then I think about a day like today where, we have two tenants in our building. One of them is an IT professional, and one of them is the Democratic Central Committee of Garrett County, who were meeting in somebody's living room before they became one of our tenants. So I get to see, just on the walk here from my building to where we're recording this podcast. I see some of my tenants that are talking to people in front of my building about the upcoming election. And then I walk down to the farmer's market and I see Catherine from Backbone Farm and Backbone Hemp, who's one of my clients, and I say hi to her and I'm looking at her produce. And then I walk up the street, up Alder Street, and I walk by Vagabond, that's one of my clients, and I wave to one of the servers that I know. Oh, and there's one of my neighbors that's sitting there having lunch. It's stuff that you just do not experience in a larger community, I don't think, in the way that you experience it here. It really is a true community where people want to help one another, people want to live in community, people want to be in relationship in that kind of authentic way that I think is unique to this like wonderful small town. And again, it's so different from what my life looked like before, but there's a richness there that is hard to replicate in other environments.
Certainly. Well, and I just over the weekend went to Detroit. It was wonderful to see family, connect with old friends, and just go to my old haunts, my favorite spots where I used to live. But coming home is always a great pleasure. And what's great about our location is you want to still have access to these urban centers and these cities you're within 2 hour drive of Pittsburgh, Baltimore, depending on where you're at in the county, DC. In 5 hours, I'm in Detroit, in Michigan. It's not that bad. If you're
Yeah.
willing to have a little short cart ride, go out, stay with family, spend a weekend, but to have the satisfaction to know that I'm going back to the mountains, I'm going back to the fresh air, I'm getting away from the traffic and the mess. It's just, it is lifting a heavy weight off your shoulders every time it happens.
Yeah.
And you know that, and I think everyone that's learned to call Garrett County home can share a similar story.
When you said the weight off your shoulders, that's the feeling when I drive home, either if I'm coming from Baltimore or other parts, Pittsburgh, whatever. It's like when I see certain mountains, I literally feel something change in my body, because I think there is like this tension that I found that I was holding, and that as much, like, again, I love to go visit Baltimore. I love to see my family there. I love to see my old haunts and clients and cultural things. But I find myself like driving up 68 and going over Sidling Hill and just releasing something, that I had been holding, because I think there is this peace that I have here that I just wasn't experiencing when I was there.
Awesome.
So,
Well, Kendall, I think we've learned a lot today, and thank you so much for sharing about your businesses and everything you've got going on here in the community. I think you've got an important story to tell, and I'm happy that we're going to be able to share it with others. We're looking to bring more customers to your door. We're looking to bring more citizens to call Garrett County home. We're looking to grow businesses here. But thank you for your time today and all you've done. At the end of every episode, I kind of leave the mic open. If there's something you want to plug coming up, if you got something special going on, this is your time. Tell us what you got going on.
sure. I think I'm going to take a couple minutes to just plug Jitterbug a little bit more, because our fall classes start on Saturday. So if you've never danced in your life, you are welcome here. If you are any age, any size, any ability level, this any sort of thing that might have been holding you back from trying something new, this is me giving you a warm welcome and saying that you are welcome at Jitterbug, and there's a space for you. And we will work with you if you have an injury, or if you have any sort of limitation that you're thinking, well, I can't do that class because I can't touch my toes or whatever. It doesn't matter. We're here to help you find something new that you love. We not only have weekly classes that, like I said, start Saturday, including a kids ballet and modern, an adult ballet, and a tap class that I actually teach myself. But then we have a couple of special workshops coming up. So we have a yoga workshop that's coming up in a few Saturdays at our town theater. I'm going to be teaching a couple classes at a women's retreat in Flintstone, Maryland. And then I had mentioned before, we have a couple spots left, not many, for East Coast Swing for couples. And that's a 3-week session, so you have to be available for all 3 dates, but we have one in October and one in November, 2 sessions. And it's a wonderful date night for any couple that's interested in learning how to do something together, or maybe they already know how to and they just need a little refresher.
Yeah.
But it's a great way to connect. I'm a big believer that movement heals, and that it's really, really important to find ways to move that feel good to you, and that, we tend to carry a lot of trauma and stress in our bodies, and sometimes we're not even aware of it. But when we find movement that serves us well, and it might not be in a dance class, but if you've been looking to move in a different way, I challenge you that maybe this is what you've been looking for, and you can come and try a class. And if it's not for you, I completely understand, but everyone is welcome, and we'd love to see you at Jitterbug. So if you go to dothejitterbug.com, you'll see everything that we have coming up.
Go there, check them out, folks. Again, Kendall, thank you so much for coming in. And thank you all for listening to the Business B.E.A.R podcast. We hope to hear more from you soon. Be following us on our Garrett County, Maryland Department of Business Development Facebook page. We've got a Twitter or X, whatever it's being called these days. We also have an Instagram and a LinkedIn. Follow us to see all your latest happenings in the business development world here in Garrett County. Also, when to see when other great episodes like this one of the Business B.E.A.R podcast are dropping. Again, thank you so much to Kendall Ludwig, our principal owner and operator of both Jitterbug Dance Studio and CurlyRed, for coming in to talk with us. And thank you all for listening to the Business B.E.A.R podcast. It's your buddy Connor Norman here. I'll see you all on the other side.